Sometimes some of you will ask me questions like, okay, so now what do I do? Or, so what's the solution to this? Or even, so how do I fix this? And in hindsight, after years of healing from narcissistic abuse and the trauma associated with it, it seems really clear and obvious. You leave the relationship. But I know that when you're in the middle of it, and especially when you're just first realizing what you're dealing with, it doesn't seem that simple. It can be really confusing, really heartbreaking, and even terrifying. So in this video, I want to give the long answer to this question and some things to think about that might help you come to the decision of what it is you're going to do now. Welcome to Looking Behind the Mirror, where we explore narcissism and take our lives back as we make sense out of nonsense. As a quick disclaimer, everything I say is based on my opinions and my personal experiences. I'm not a professional, and if you're really struggling, I encourage you to seek professional help. I am providing links below for you. The first thing I want to talk about is being in a position where you're trying to decide what to do. Maybe you're trying to get over this hump of maybe feeling guilty, like I can't just abandon this person, right? Or maybe, what if I'm wrong? What if they're not a narcissist? What if I'm making a big deal out of nothing? This can be a really hard hill to get over because all throughout the relationship, you've probably been gaslighted and conditioned to believe that you overreact to things, that you make a big deal out of nothing, and also that you somehow owe this person so much more than you actually do. A great big deal was probably made out of everything the narcissist did, and everything that you did was probably greatly minimized. So you probably have this sense that you don't have a right to leave this person. And I know for me, I spent some time trying to gather evidence or validation that I really did have a right to leave this abusive relationship. So first of all, if you're stuck on wondering whether or not the person you're with is really a narcissist, I mean, what does that even really mean? Are they really somebody that could be diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder or some other cluster B disorder? Are they really pathological? Is this really truly hopeless? I think that this is the wrong avenue to go down if you're trying to make an important decision. What's more important is, how does this person treat you? How do they make you feel? Do they make you feel unsafe in your own home? Do they make you feel unloved? Do they make you feel unlovable? Do they make you feel unacceptable, like nothing you do is ever good enough? That's what really matters. In my opinion, being with a narcissist isn't a problem in and of itself just because the person is a narcissist. The real problems with narcissism is the behaviors. So if you are with somebody that behaves like a narcissist, that treats you like you don't matter, that throws tantrums over nothing, that holds things over your head, that is never satisfied with anything you do, that's what really matters. So what are you dealing with? Are you dealing with somebody that treats you like crap? Because you can't diagnose somebody unless you're a mental health professional and you are treating somebody that you're not in any sort of personal relationship with. You can't diagnose anyone with anything. So you never really will know with 100% certainty whether or not the person you're with is a real narcissist or not, but it really doesn't matter. When I talk about narcissism and explain how narcissism works, it's for the purpose of helping you understand what the hell is going on in this relationship. It's not for the purpose of helping people that aren't professionals and aren't certified diagnose anybody with anything. It's to help you understand what's happening. So it doesn't really matter if somebody really is a real narcissist or not if they're treating you like crap. Another thing that we could get hung up on is, what if this person changed? And I know I've gone over this several times in even some recent videos. And I just want to say, like, what if anybody changed? I mean, what if you're with somebody who's really nice and kind and wonderful, but what if they changed? What if they suddenly became a horrible, awful, mean person? We can't really make our decisions based on what might happen, on what somebody might become, because people are acting the way they want to act. They are being who they are. And if somebody's treating you like garbage, that's who they are. That's the reality of the relationship. And that's something that almost never changes. People don't just change who they are, unless, of course, in the beginning of the relationship, they were acting loving and wonderful in order to hook you and bait you into the relationship. But other than that, you really have to make your decisions on what your present reality is. And then, as I touched on a few minutes ago, what if you're overreacting? What if you're making a big deal out of nothing? What if this isn't really abuse? I would ask you to ask yourself, how do you feel? How does this relationship make you feel? Because that's not something to blame yourself for. That's just the reality of how this relationship is affecting you. Do you feel like you can't do anything right? Do you feel unsafe? Do you feel unloved, uncomfortable, unacceptable? Does this relationship make your life miserable? Even if you were completely making this up in your head with somebody who was actually a really great person, it's nobody's fault. If a relationship is making you miserable, you have a right to make your own decisions for your own life. And if your partner is trying to make you feel guilty or make you feel like your feelings are wrong and unreasonable, that's all the more reason to want to leave. In my opinion, I wouldn't want to be with somebody that is trying to tell me that my feelings are wrong. I wouldn't want to be with somebody who isn't interested in how I feel or is committed to making me doubt my own reality. Another really big hurdle to get over when you're first realizing that you're dealing with a narcissist is accepting things that you cannot change. And I think there are a lot of people that never learn how to do this because it's really difficult. It's really unfair. You have to accept that this person is not the person you thought they were. You have to accept that maybe they're just really awful. They don't care about your feelings. They don't want to be nice to you. They don't want to change their behavior, even though they should. Maybe they don't love you, even though they should. It's really hard to let go and accept these things that are so unfair, so painful, and things that are not what you were promised. I mean, these are fraudulent relationships. These are relationships that are based on lies. We were sold a pack of lies that is never going to be what we thought it was, what it was supposed to be. We can get stuck for a very long time trying to turn it into what it was supposed to be, trying to make this person decent. And it's really hard to give up on that when all you're asking is for somebody to treat you like a human being or to give you even half the respect that they gave you in the beginning of the relationship or to even consider your feelings at all. It's like, that's what this person is supposed to do. That's what they owe to you, is just some common basic decency. How do you just give up and accept that this person is just never going to do what they're supposed to do? Well, you can beat your head against a brick wall for as long as you choose to do so, but you can't change people. You can't turn a horrible human being into a decent, thoughtful person. It's like if you were in a restaurant and they served you a delicious looking piece of cheesecake that just looked and smelled amazing and delicious. And I mean, you paid for it and it's supposed to be cheesecake. And this is what you bought. This is what you were sold. This is what it's supposed to be. But after you eat a few bites that taste great, suddenly it starts to taste like rotten fish, let's say. And then the next bite tastes like rotten fish, but it's not supposed to be rotten fish. It's supposed to be cheesecake, right? That's what you are owed. That's what you were sold. So how long are you going to keep eating this rotten fish cheesecake before you accept that that's what this is, even though it's not supposed to be? How many bites of this cheesecake are you going to take? And I know, like, to use this analogy more with abusive relationships, every now and then a bite is going to taste like cheesecake again. And you think, oh, good. Oh boy, I finally got past all the rotten fish and now it's just going to be delicious cheesecake again like it's supposed to be. But unfortunately, it never turns out that way. Once you start tasting rotten fish, something's wrong with that cheesecake. And you really just have to accept that, as unfair as it is, that's your reality. And to use this analogy even further, I think there's guilt that goes along with throwing the cheesecake away, with giving up on it. You know, with saying to yourself, I can't give up on this cheesecake. I don't want to throw it away. Like, I don't want to throw a human being away, discard a human being the way that a narcissist does. But that's what the narcissist did to you. That's what an abusive person has done to you when they have broken promises, when the relationship was based on fraud and lies. That's what they've done to you. They've treated you like a disposable piece of garbage. You're not throwing anyone away. You're leaving an unsafe, hurtful, abusive, traumatizing relationship. Another huge hurdle that I'm still working on years later is accepting injustice. This is even harder, for me at least, than accepting that some people are just awful and there's nothing you can do about it. Accepting that people get away with doing terrible things to people. People can be really awful, abusive, con men, liars, and ruin people's lives and not have to pay for it and not have any serious consequences. This is really, really, really difficult to accept when there is nothing you can do to bring justice to certain situations in your life. And this is something that I think can keep you stuck for a long time, trying to figure out how to make this person pay for what they've done to you. I'm not somebody that believes that you have to forgive everybody for everything. I think that you can forgive people if you feel ready to do so. I'm also not somebody that really believes in karma or anything like that. I mean, if you believe in something like that, I suppose that could bring you comfort. But I believe that some people just get away with doing terrible things to people. And the karma that they do have is that most people that treat people like crap and abuse people and con people and spend their whole life perpetrating a fraud are pretty miserable people. These aren't happy people that go around ruining people's lives. So just being themselves is a pretty miserable existence. That's really not quite satisfying enough for me, but it's a little bit, you know, these people are not really happy about anything, and that's why they go around hurting people, because they're constantly trying to fill this bucket with a hole in the bottom and nothing's ever enough for them. One thing that helps me a little is to think about the things that hurt the most, the things that make me the angriest, things that people have done to me that they never had to answer for, that there was no resolution to. I imagine, what if that person did that to somebody else? Or what if somebody did exactly that same thing to somebody else, somebody I don't know? I would still be upset about that. I would probably feel sorry for the person that happened to, but it doesn't hurt quite as much. It doesn't bring up the same amount of anger and rage that's really hard to reconcile, that's really hard to heal and get over when I imagine it happening to someone else, not because I don't care about other people, but because it helps me see that this isn't personal. People that go around abusing people and ruining people's lives do it to random people that the opportunity presents itself with. It really isn't personal. Even though it personally affects you, it could have been anyone that this horrible person did this thing to. It wasn't you specifically that they wanted to hurt. They just go around hurting people. That's who they are. And it helps me to really understand that this person that hurt me, they've probably hurt someone else the same way, and they hurt people before me the same way. And that's just what they do. They go around hurting people. There's crappy, awful people in this world. And unfortunately, for a lot of us, we're going to cross their paths at some point in our lives, and we're going to be hurt by these people that go around hurting people. Another thing to keep in mind as you're just starting to process the idea that you're with a pathological person is learning the difference between asserting boundaries and fighting with somebody. When you are with, especially with a pathologically narcissistic person, you are going to be goaded a lot into defending yourself, into arguing over things, and trying to clear up some misunderstanding they have, or trying to tell them that you don't have the intentions they imagine that you do, and you end up in these 3-hour arguments over nothing that go nowhere and make no sense. But I know for me, there was one particular relationship I was in where I would be insulted and treated badly. And I would say something like, don't talk to me like that. Don't say that. And then I would engage in an argument about it. And I felt like I was standing up for myself. Like that was me asserting a boundary, saying like, hey, don't do that. And then proceeding to argue about it. But I know in the back of my mind, there were a few moments of clarity that were quickly shut down. But I had these moments of clarity where I realized in the back of my mind, I should just pick up my things and just leave, because this wasn't where I lived. I was visiting this person. And I thought to myself, I should just pick up my things and just walk out the door. And that was the voice of clarity. I did not listen to that voice, but that was how to assert a boundary. Instead, I proceeded to argue about it. Now, when you have real boundaries, you should never, ever have to argue with anybody about your boundaries. Real boundaries are just enforced. They're not argued over. For people that actually care about you, you should be able to explain your boundaries or just state them, and then that person will respect them. And if they ever cross over your boundary, you can remind them and they will say, oh, sorry, I forgot, or whatever, because they will respect your boundaries. And if you have to argue with somebody about your boundaries, that person is telling you that they don't respect your boundaries. And the only thing you can do at that point is to remove yourself. Like if you're visiting somebody and they step over your boundaries, you need to leave. I know it's not that simple if you live with somebody, but there are still, even in that situation, there are still better ways of trying to enforce your boundaries than to engage in an argument. You should never have to argue about your boundaries, and arguing about your boundaries will never, ever, ever get you anywhere, because arguing really just lends credibility to what the other person is doing. If you're willing to spend the energy arguing about something, you're telling that person that their viewpoint is at least worth considering, at least worth arguing over. Another thing that I haven't touched on yet, which is a really big deal, is dealing with the grief of realizing that somebody that was really important to you is not what you thought they were. That all of this love and just the importance, the fantasy built up in your head was all a fantasy. That this person really doesn't care about you, that all the feelings that they had in the beginning or that they pretended to have in the beginning were actually very superficial and fleeting. This can be a real nightmare for a lot of people. This is no joke. This is your whole world crumbling down around you. And I have to remind myself of this sometimes when I get questions like, okay, well, how do I fix this? Well, what do I do now? Because it's not that easy to just accept overnight, oh, this relationship is crap and I need to leave it. Because you're so emotionally enmeshed with this person and invested in all the dreams that you've built up in your head about the future you're going to share with this person and what this person means to you and how they feel about you. All these lies that you've been sold, all these lies that you've fallen in love with. It's not easy to let go of that. It can be devastating. And when we're looking for solutions to a narcissistic relationship, we're really just desperately trying to avoid this extreme pain and grief that we really will need to walk through at some point. But denying the reality that you're with someone that doesn't care about you, denying the reality that you're with somebody that has such extreme emotional problems that they will never really care about you, doesn't change the fact that that's the kind of person this is. And the longer you pretend in your head that there's any chance that you can fix this relationship that's already demonstrated itself to be toxic and hurtful and abusive, the longer you postpone this process of grief that really will in the end lead to the freedom that you really deserve. This really sucks. And unless you've been through it yourself, it's really indescribable how much it can hurt to break a really strong trauma bond with an abusive partner. This is pain that can seem to just go on endlessly. It can feel unbearable. It takes over your whole life. It takes over your thoughts 24/7. It's horrible. But I've been through it, and I just want to say after all that hell that I walked through, it was worth it in the end. I recovered, and now I have my life back, and I'm no longer in an abusive relationship, and I'm free to make my own decisions about my own life. I'm free to live in an environment that I feel safe in. I'm free to make my own rules and my own boundaries. And I just want to pass that on to those of you that are still dealing with that grief. I know how terrible it is, but it really is worth it if in the end you are free of this abusive relationship that caused all of that pain in the first place. One more thing I want to talk about is recognizing the danger in an abusive relationship. This can be a real reason that keeps you stuck in this relationship, because leaving an abusive person really is dangerous. There is a lot to consider, and I just want to remind people not to underestimate what their abuser is capable of. Somebody that has been abusive towards you before you ever had a thought of leaving is going to get much worse once you decide to leave the relationship. And this might be disguised as hoovering. Maybe when you try to leave, this person suddenly changes and becomes like an angel and suddenly starts listening to you. But that is masking something much more dangerous. That is masking rage. If somebody has been abusive towards you and you try to leave, I guarantee you that person is enraged that you have the nerve to think that you have the right to live without them. And so if they suddenly start acting better and nicer, that's manipulation, and that is hiding some very dangerous anger. This is really no joke. When you're leaving an abuser, the grief that you feel and the fantasies that you've had in your head for so long can really blind you to what this person is actually capable of doing. And it might not necessarily be physical danger. This person might sabotage your job or destroy your relationships with your own kids. You know, there's all kinds of things this person could do to ruin your life apart from physical violence. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. That is something that makes this not so simple. It's not always so simple as just leave. You really need to have a plan in place to protect yourself from anything this person could do. And like I said in the beginning, you might have a hard time believing this, not just because this person has convinced you that they're some kind of wonderful, awesome, great person, but because you've been gaslighted throughout the whole relationship to minimize all of your feelings and all of your gut reactions to things. So if you start wondering, is this person dangerous? Could this person do X, Y, or Z to me if I'm not careful? You might have that conditioning kick in telling you, oh, you're making a big deal out of nothing. Oh, stop being such a drama queen or a drama king. And that can leave you open to all kinds of horrible things that this person could do to you. So in conclusion, what do I do now? How do I fix this? You can't fix another person, and you can't fix a relationship when you're the only person that's trying or putting effort into it. You can't change an abusive person into a nice person. This is a time to really understand what you can and cannot control, and to make your decisions based on the reality of what's happening right now. Just because something should be what you were promised, what you were sold, doesn't mean that it is. Just because somebody's supposed to love you doesn't mean they do. Just because somebody owes you a little bit of respect doesn't mean that they're going to give it to you. And the more energy you put into trying to force things to be what they're not, the more time you waste on a relationship that's really taking away from your life rather than adding to it. For me, just going through the process of accepting it, leaving, ending the relationship, cutting these relationships off was really scary. It was really painful. I lost a lot of things, but for me, it was worth all of that to be free of somebody that had control over me but didn't have any respect for me. Somebody that was taking so much and giving me back so little. You can't always control everything that's going on in your life when you're dealing with other people, but you can find a way to reclaim your life for yourself. You can find a way to make changes for yourself. It's just like a mountain that you have to decide for yourself you are going to climb. I hope this helps. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up and comment below any ideas you have for me for future videos. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you like this video and would like to see more like it in the future. Until next time, thanks. Bye.